On a Wednesday afternoon in Mobile, Alabama, nothing was remarkable except the sun beating down on the pavement like a relentless blaze, thickening the air with heat and fatigue. The shopping strip housing Southern Hearth Grill felt forgotten by time, sandwiched between a peeling sign of a rundown bar and a pawn shop always lit up despite few visitors. Beneath the harsh sun, no one paid attention as a man entered the restaurant. He wore a worn brown leather jacket, faded jeans, and scuffed boots. A baseball cap pulled low shaded his sun-weathered face, the wrinkles around his eyes carved deeply by years and quiet observation. He moved with the deliberate silence of experienced black men entering unfamiliar spaces, not hurried, not showy, but purposeful. It wasn't fear, it was habit, a reflex forged over decades, walking among eyes that always judged. The young server barely glanced up as he stepped inside. "Table for one?" he asked without looking away from his tablet. "Yes." "If possible, somewhere quiet," the man replied, voice low and steady without emphasis. The server led him to table 7, near the large front window with a full view of the dining room and the slightly ajar kitchen door. The man sat slowly, hands resting on the table, eyes quietly observing, but head unmoving, as if well practiced at reading a room's story through motion and expression alone. He picked up the menu, scanning it like a newcomer, though he already knew what he would order. The man Marcus Ellison was more than a customer. He was the founder of Southern Hearth Grill, a chain once praised as a symbol of Southern cuisine in America. From a small spot in Montgomery in 1997, Marcus had built over 20 branches across the Southeast by hand. But after years stepping back to let regional managers run the show, the numbers no longer told the truth. The mobile branch was particularly unstable, plummeting sales, constant staff turnover, harsh online complaints, and explanations Marcus couldn't accept. The reasons were many: tough market, scarce labor, rising costs. But he didn't want reasons. He wanted the truth. And the only way to find it was to walk in here nameless, titleless, unannounced. Inside, the restaurant was dim, mirroring the tired fluorescent lights overhead. Servers moved as if walking on eggshells, and the kitchen barely showed itself beyond the gently swinging door. Then she came to his table, the first server whose eyes did not avoid his. "Hello, I'm Sadie. I'll be serving you today," she said, hair tied loosely in a messy bun, sleeves rolled up, gaze cautious but not weak. Marcus looked up and nodded slowly. "What's usually the most popular dish here?" he asked, voice still low, as if the story was just beginning. She glanced at the menu as if it burdened her. "Ribeye is solid. Comes with mashed potatoes and braised greens." Marcus closed the menu and nodded gently. "I'll have that. Medium rare." She nodded and turned without another word. Marcus leaned back, eyes quietly roaming the room again. Near the bar, a large man in a tight polo shirt, shaved head, arms crossed, stood as if all the staff were potential threats. Watching him, Marcus guessed he was the manager, a type who didn't need to shout but made people tense by mere presence. The steak arrived earlier than expected, cooked just right, the plate still hot, a sign the kitchen still held some pride in their craft. But the atmosphere did not. Something had rotted from within, and Marcus sensed it clearly in Sadie's tired eyes when she returned to drop the bill and quietly walked away. No extra words, no expression. Only a folded note slipped inside the receipt. 6 handwritten words in blue ink. And they changed everything. Marcus didn't open the note right away. He placed his hand on the freshly poured coffee, maintaining a calm exterior while his eyes fixed on the glass door, reflecting Sadie, the server who had just left. She didn't look at him directly, but that glance from behind the counter, faint through the glass, said more than any words could. Slowly, Marcus unfolded the paper. Just 6 words, yet they sliced through every layer of armor he had built to keep distance from this world. "If it's really you, don't leave before talking to me." Nothing changed on Marcus's face. His heart didn't race. His breath didn't quicken. But inside, something shifted. Those 6 words didn't just confirm that the girl knew who he was. They confirmed what he had suspected since stepping inside. Something was happening here beyond poor management or subpar service. Something deeper, more serious, and someone inside had found the courage to speak up, quietly, urgently. Marcus folded the note back and hid it in his palm. His gaze swept toward the kitchen, where the large man from before Sadie had called him Travis, if he heard right, stood near the pass door, pretending to check a clipboard but really watching everything like someone who controlled a room by presence alone. No need to raise his voice. The kind of person who didn't have to shout to make others bow their heads, just being there was enough. And Marcus knew that type well. He'd met them, worked with them, removed them from the system he had built. But the silence here was scarier than any shout, because it showed how deep the fear had rooted. He rose slowly, placed some cash on the table, and grabbed the bill. Without a word, without looking around, he didn't head for the front door but turned toward the narrow back corridor marked Employees Only Sanitation Area. He walked calmly, like a man searching for the restroom, neither hurried nor avoiding. Behind him, Travis's voice called out evenly but suspiciously, "Sir, the restroom's down the hall." Marcus paused, turned halfway. "I'm looking for the manager." Travis approached cautiously, eyes wary. "That's me," he replied, his tone coated with forced politeness. Marcus stared him down with unwavering eyes full of weight. "Can we talk?" Travis raised an eyebrow. "About what?" Marcus lowered his voice, expression unchanged. "I need to speak with my server." Travis closed the gap, arms crossed, gaze sharpening. "If you have complaints, tell me. You don't have permission to pull my staff off their shift. We don't operate like that here." Marcus didn't back down. He spoke slowly, each word clear. "Then maybe it's time things worked differently." A tense silence fell between them. Travis studied him as if trying to place the face, but Marcus gave him no time to guess. He turned and walked down the back hallway, leaving confusion that hadn't yet turned into response. At the end of the corridor, he saw Sadie carrying a box of lemons, hurrying by. Their eyes met. She froze, not from surprise, but from fear and urgency. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, barely audible. Marcus reached into his jacket and gently pulled out the note. "I read it. Now you speak." Sadie glanced around, then pulled him toward a small storage room and closed the door behind them. The dim yellow light from the ceiling cast shadows on her weary face, deepening the hollows under her eyes. The air hung heavy with the scent of cleaning chemicals, burnt oil, and damp wood. Yet she stood tall, voice trembling but unflinching. "I didn't know if you'd read it, or if you'd even stay." Marcus said nothing. He just listened, because he knew the next words she spoke might be the only truth left in this place. And if his intuition was right, that note was not a warning. It was a signal from someone struggling in silence, finally finding someone brave enough to listen. In that cramped, dimly lit space, Sadie stood facing Marcus as if the distance between boss and employee had vanished, replaced by a fragile bond of trust being tested. She wiped her hand across her forehead, her voice hoarse from fatigue and fear. "Travis isn't just difficult. He's dangerous. Shipments that arrive at night suddenly disappear. The liquor is always short. The cash drawer is always missing money, but only on the shifts Travis closes. He cuts hours, then adjusts the clock-in times in the system so HR won't notice. Anyone who speaks up loses their shift or disappears from the schedule without explanation." Marcus narrowed his eyes. "No one dares to say anything?" Sadie let out a bitter, short laugh. "Everyone's scared. We have mortgages, kids, hospitals, bills. One girl caught him taking cash from the bar drawer. The next weekend, she was permanently cut from shifts. No reason, no explanation." She paused, looking directly into Marcus's eyes. "I'm telling you this because I worked at the Montgomery branch 6 years ago when you came for the opening. Maybe you don't remember, but that day there was a customer choking on a fish bone, and I was the first to run over. You tipped me $100 just because I acted before anyone else. You said I had initiative. I never forgot that. Today I see that face again, not in a suit, but the real you. I know if I don't speak now, there may never be a second chance." Marcus nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "I remember you. I remember that day. His gaze was no longer guarded, but respectful, the kind of respect born from being overlooked and underestimated, now recognizing the same quiet fire in the woman before him. "I'll be back tomorrow," he said, but not as a stranger. Sadie trembled slightly and glanced toward the door. "Then you should take the back way. Travis has cameras up front." Marcus folded the note and slipped it into his jacket pocket. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. Sadie gripped the handle of the lemon box tightly. "I've survived this far. I'll be fine." Marcus didn't smile, but nodded the nod of someone who understands courage isn't always loud, but shown by speaking out at the moment when everything is against you. He left the storage room, slipped through the side door, and headed straight to a cheap motel a few blocks away. The place smelled of bleach and old paint, the front desk behind thick glass. No questions were asked, none needed. He chose the spot because no one paid attention, because what he was about to do didn't need spotlight, only silence to watch. The note remained in his jacket pocket, slightly crumpled but intact. Those 6 words had opened a door. Now he had to step through and face whatever waited on the other side, not as a boss, but as a man who had built an empire with kindness and now had to undo each brick to understand why it was cracking. The clock showed 10:17 p.m. When Marcus's phone buzzed, a message appeared with no sender name, only 6 words. "Parking lot by the dumpster, 11 o'clock, alone." No explanation, no extra words, but Marcus didn't need any. He understood. This wasn't a trap, it was an opportunity, and if Sadie was brave enough to send it, he couldn't ignore it. At exactly 10:58, Marcus arrived behind the restaurant. The flickering security light cast a weary glow on the darkened red brick wall. He leaned against it, hands tucked into the pockets of his worn leather jacket. Around him, only the hum of an industrial fan and the scrape of a cat's claws on a metal bin broke the silence. A cold breeze slipped under his collar, but he didn't shiver. He had faced waits like this during negotiations, surprise inspections, and now, in the dead of night, in darkness, to hear a server speak the truth. At 11:03, the back door creaked open. Sadie stepped out, hood pulled low, her steps quick but unhurried. She glanced around before approaching. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. "I promised," Marcus replied. "Does anyone know you're here?" Sadie shook her head, then motioned for him to follow. They turned down a narrow passage between brick walls where no light could reach. Once sure no one was watching, Sadie stopped and took a deep breath before pulling a small key wrapped in tissue from her pocket. "This opens Travis's locker. Inside is a black cloth bag. He hides a burner phone there. I saw him use it to make quick calls when he thought no one was paying attention." Marcus raised his eyebrow. "You've been watching him?" he asked, not out of suspicion, but surprise. Sadie nodded without blinking. "Because no one else will. And I can't keep watching him trample everyone like this is his kingdom." "You know this could cost you your job," Sadie shrugged. "I lost my job the moment I started asking questions. Every time I spoke up, my shifts were cut or canceled, my attitude unfairly recorded. I'm tired, but I'm more tired of silence than resistance." Marcus looked at her, feeling not just empathy, but a renewed trust. "You're brave," he said. Sadie smiled faintly. "No, I'm just exhausted from enduring." He understood too well. He had carried that same weariness, proving his worth 3 times over just because he was black, then holding his peace to keep the peace once he reached the boardroom. "I'll be back tomorrow," Marcus said, "but not as a stranger." Sadie shivered slightly and glanced toward the door. "Then you should go out the back. Travis has cameras up front." Marcus folded the note and slipped it into his jacket pocket. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. Sadie gripped the lemon box handle tightly. "I've survived this far. I'll be fine." Marcus didn't smile, but nodded the nod of someone who knows courage isn't always loud, but shown by speaking out when everything is against you. He left the storage room, slipped through the side door, and walked straight to a cheap motel a few blocks away. The place smelled of bleach and old paint, the front desk behind thick glass. No questions asked, none needed. He chose the spot because no one noticed, because what he was about to do didn't need attention, only silence to observe. The note remained in his jacket pocket, slightly crumpled but intact. Those 6 words had opened a door. Now he had to step through and face what waited on the other side, not as a boss, but as a man who built an empire with kindness and now had to undo each brick to understand why it was cracking. The next morning, Marcus didn't return home. He wore the same worn leather jacket, faded jeans, and scuffed boots, the same outfit as the day before. Not to save money, but because he didn't want to appear as a boss. He knew the title CEO could make people play roles, but he needed the truth, and the truth only revealed itself when those playing parts didn't know they were being watched. He entered the restaurant just before the lunch rush. The receptionist was the same young man as before, headset half hidden under messy hair, fingers tapping quickly on a cracked iPad. "Back again?" the young man muttered without looking up. "Just a strange week," Marcus smiled shortly. The young man waved toward the row of tables near the window, the old table. Marcus sat down, his eyes scanning the room. The atmosphere felt different than yesterday. The staff moved faster, more efficiently, but tension still hung in the air like steam over a hot stove. Sadie passed by, her eyes briefly meeting his. No words, just a subtle nod enough to confirm things were beginning. Then Travis appeared, wearing a tight polo shirt stretched over his stomach, clipboard in hand, walking as if patrolling his territory. His eyes locked on Marcus from the first step. He approached the table with a forced smile plastered on his lips. "Back again? Thought you'd become a regular." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "The food's good. I want to see if it stays that way 2 days in a row." Travis chuckled, but it was strained. "If you have feedback, tell me. I'm known as a strict manager." Marcus looked him straight in the eye. "I can see that." Travis stood still a few seconds, then turned away. But Marcus knew he felt it, that feeling when control starts slipping, when someone's watching behind the curtain, unreadable. Marcus didn't eat. After a few minutes of watching, he left some cash on the table and exited through the front door, circling around to the back of the restaurant. As arranged, a mop bucket blocked the side door, Sadie's silent signal. He stepped inside quietly, unnoticed. The employee hallway was silent, the flickering lights like heavy breaths. The storage room at the end wasn't locked. Inside was the tall, crooked employee locker labeled TB. The small key Sadie gave him last night fit perfectly, clicking softly. Inside, a black cloth bag, cheap perfume, gym clothes, and in a side compartment, a phone without case or lock. Marcus lit up. The contact list showed only initials: JL, BH, GT, I. He snapped screenshots of each screen, every message. In the other compartment, he pulled out a wad of cash, rubber-banded. Small bills, no counting marks. Cash from the register, no records. Another sign of fraud, and a living proof. Marcus turned toward the adjacent manager's office. The smell of spoiled food and tension hung thick in the air. In the second drawer, he found a black notebook labeled faintly, Langley's Daily Book. Inside were inventory records mismatched with orders, missing alcohol data, tips rounded down, hours crossed out, and rewritten with different ink. This was no longer suspicion. This was a deliberate fraud system in operation. As he was about to tuck the notebook into his jacket, the back door swung open. Travis stood there, arms crossed, no smile. "Thought you were smart, huh?" he growled. Marcus didn't flinch. "I suspected from the start. Your walk, your eyes, not a customer." Marcus looked him straight in the eye. "You talk too much, Travis, especially with those dirty hands." Travis stepped fully inside, closing the door. "Breaking into my locker, my office. Think you'll walk out of here easy?" Marcus gripped the notebook tightly. "I'm not leaving as a customer. I'm leaving as someone on the lease, the owner of this place." Travis froze. Marcus stepped forward, voice low. "You've stolen, threatened, manipulated, and covered up like an amateur. But the papers don't lie." Travis pressed his lips, fists clenched. Marcus added gently, "Call security. Call the cops if you want. Then we'll go over every number together." Travis was silent. Then he laughed a bitter, tired laugh. "You think it's just me? Glenn's involved too. He brought me in. He wants results. I'm just doing my job." Marcus narrowed his eyes. "I know." And this time he stepped past Travis without hesitation, because in his hand he held not just suspicion, but proof. And when you have proof, the wall of silence begins to crumble. The next morning, Marcus didn't go home. He put on the same worn leather jacket, faded jeans, and scuffed boots, the same outfit as the day before. Not to save money, but because he didn't want to show up looking like a boss. He knew the title CEO could make people put on a show, but he needed the truth, and truth only reveals itself when those playing parts don't realize they're being watched. He arrived at the restaurant just before the lunch rush. The receptionist was the same young man as before, headset half hidden under messy hair, fingers tapping quickly on a cracked iPad. "Back again?" the young man muttered without looking up. "Just a strange week," Marcus smiled shortly. The young man waved toward the row of tables near the window, the old table. Marcus sat down, his eyes scanning the room. The atmosphere felt different than yesterday. The staff moved faster, more efficiently, but tension still hung in the air like steam over a hot stove. Sadie passed by, her eyes briefly meeting his. No words, just a subtle nod enough to confirm things were beginning. Then Travis appeared, wearing a tight polo shirt stretched over his stomach, clipboard in hand, walking as if patrolling his territory. His eyes locked on Marcus from the first step. He approached the table with a forced smile plastered on his lips. "Back again? Thought you'd become a regular." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "The food's good. I want to see if it stays that way 2 days in a row." Travis chuckled, but it was strained. "If you have feedback, tell me. I'm known as a strict manager." Marcus looked him straight in the eye. "I can see that." Travis stood still a few seconds, then turned away. But Marcus knew he felt it. That feeling when control starts slipping, when someone's watching behind the curtain, unreadable. Marcus didn't eat. After a few minutes of watching, he left some cash on the table and exited through the front door, circling around to the back of the restaurant. As arranged, a mop bucket blocked the side door, Sadie's silent signal. He stepped inside quietly, unnoticed. The employee hallway was silent, the flickering lights like heavy breaths. The storage room at the end wasn't locked. Inside was the tall, crooked employee locker labeled TB. The small key Sadie gave him last night fit perfectly, clicking softly. Inside, a black cloth bag, cheap perfume, gym clothes, and in a side compartment, a phone without case or lock. Marcus lit up. The contact list showed only initials: JL, BH, GT, FRI. He snapped screenshots of each screen, every message. In the other compartment, he pulled out a wad of cash, rubber banded. Small bills, no counting marks. Cash from the register, no records. Another sign of fraud and a living proof. Marcus turned toward the adjacent manager's office. The smell of spoiled food and tension hung thick in the air. In the second drawer, he found a black notebook labeled faintly, Langley's Daily Book. Inside were inventory records mismatched with orders, missing alcohol data, tips rounded down, hours crossed out and rewritten with different ink. This was no longer suspicion. This was a deliberate fraud system in operation. As he was about to tuck the notebook into his jacket, the back door swung open. Travis stood there, arms crossed. No smile. "Thought you were smart, huh?" he growled. Marcus didn't flinch. "I suspected from the start. Your walk, your eyes, not a customer." Marcus looked him straight in the eye. "You talk too much, Travis, especially with those dirty hands." Travis stepped fully inside, closing the door. "Breaking into my locker, my office. Think you'll walk out of here easy?" Marcus gripped the notebook tightly. "I'm not leaving as a customer. I'm leaving as someone on the lease, the owner of this place." Travis froze. Marcus stepped forward, voice low. "You've stolen, threatened, manipulated, and covered up like an amateur, but the papers don't lie." Travis pressed his lips, fists clenched. Marcus added gently, "Call security. Call the cops if you want. Then we'll go over every number together." Travis was silent. Then he laughed a bitter, tired laugh. You think it's just me? Glenn's involved too. He brought me in. He wants results. I'm just doing my job. Marcus narrowed his eyes. I know. And this time he stepped past Travis without hesitation, because in his hand he held not just suspicion, but proof. And when you have proof, the wall of silence begins to crumble. That night, Marcus returned to the restaurant in Fort Brenton just as it was closing. No worn leather jacket, no low-hanging cap. He entered as the one role he had never relinquished: the founder, the person responsible, and this time, the one determined to reclaim what was lost. The entire space fell silent as he appeared. A few employees recognized him, but no one showed fear and acknowledgement worth more than any introduction. Sadie stepped out from the kitchen, hands still wet from washing, a towel draped over her shoulder. Everything all right? She whispered. Marcus nodded. It's time to meet with everyone. All the staff from cooks to servers, even the young new receptionist, gathered in the main dining room. They looked at each other, nervous but not avoiding. Marcus stood before them, silent for a moment. You deserve better, he began. And I was wrong for not coming sooner. No interruptions. They listened. Something this place had long lacked: true listening. Bryce has been fired. Glenn, his protector, is on his way out of the entire system. And anyone who has stolen, covered up, or threatened a colleague, you have exactly one last chance to leave on your own tonight. No sound broke the room, but in some eyes a flicker of caution briefly flared, then faded. Marcus continued. Tomorrow morning I will begin rebuilding, and I will only do so with those who truly care. He scanned the room. Tired faces no longer bowed. Then Sadie stood up. No name called, no introduction given. Just that simple act was enough for Marcus to say, she stood while others feared. She spoke the truth when everyone was silent. That is the kind of leader I trust. He turned toward the kitchen, the place where it all began, and now where it would be rebuilt. This place is not broken. It was just placed in the wrong hands. No applause, but nods, shoulders relaxed. And for the first time in months, people could breathe without fear. Marcus didn't just expose the problem. He declared war on it. But as he stepped out of the restaurant, the cool night breeze whispered down the empty street, unaware that Glenn had not surrendered. His final move had been set in motion, faster than anyone expected. A thick envelope stamped "Top Secret Urgent" rested in the hands of the night courier, headed straight for Marcus. The coming battle would no longer be just about truth and conscience. It would be law, reputation, and the future of the restaurant chain bearing his name. 2 days after the all-staff meeting, Marcus sat in the lobby of a motel where flickering fluorescent lights cast uneven shadows on the walls, and the air conditioner hummed steadily. On the table before him lay a chaotic pile of documents: photos from a burner phone, handwritten notebook pages, red ink annotations, initials, altered work hours, and vague anonymous messages. His paper coffee cup had gone cold, but he didn't care. His mind was focused like a drill. Then the receptionist walked in, handing him a yellow envelope stamped "Urgent Legal Enclosure." Marcus held it, feeling its thickness and weight like a fist wrapped in paper. The company's headquarters address was printed on top, below it the printed signature of Glenn T. Chambers. Inside was a short letter filled with phrases Marcus knew all too well. Defamation accusations, illegal intrusion, interference with regional operations. The words were carefully chosen like daggers, attempting to intimidate and bind him with the law. Marcus didn't frown. He had seen these tactics before and survived them. This was no threat. It was proof that Glenn was scared. He pulled out his phone and called Alicia Knox. "He sent this," Marcus said evenly. Alicia sighed. "Good. That means you're hitting the mark." "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. This kind of letter isn't meant to win. It's meant to scare the faint-hearted." Marcus smiled softly and set the letter down. "I don't need to scare back. I need justice." And so he returned not to Tulsa, not to the corporate headquarters, but to Fort Brenton. Back to those who never had a lawyer, were never protected, and were often told to stay silent. That night, the restaurant was cleaning up after the last shift. Familiar sounds filled the air, the printer whirring, pots and pans clinking, oil sizzling like a nighttime symphony only those in the trade could find comfort in. Marcus entered through the side door. No disguise, no hiding. He was himself. Sadie was washing a tub of lemons in the kitchen, her uniform damp with sweat at the back, hair tied up neatly. "Got a few minutes?" he asked. She nodded, dried her hands, and followed him to the office. Marcus placed the envelope on the desk. "Glenn is trying to bury me in paperwork." Sadie skimmed the first page, lips pressed tight. "You think he'll go all the way?" "No, he's playing defense, but I'm tired of defending." She folded the letter carefully and set it aside. "So what now?" Marcus looked at her steadily. "We tell the truth." She tilted her head. "Tell it to who?" "To everyone." The next day, Marcus and Sadie sat in a small diner on the east side of town, facing Ken Holland, a local journalist known for exposing what the big players want hidden. Ken ordered iced tea, opened his old laptop and notebook. Sadie told her story about the cuts, the missing goods, the threats, the long, silent nights on watch. But she also spoke of the silence, the most frightening thing of all, how everyone ducked their heads when Bryce walked in, how all hope was slowly erased. "So what happened next?" Ken asked. Sadie looked at Marcus. He showed up. Ken raised his eyebrows. "You went undercover?" Marcus shook his head slightly. "I didn't hide. I observed." Ken laughed. "For a company, that's the same thing." Marcus leaned forward. "I don't care about their rules. I care about the people hurt by those rules." 2 hours later, they had a story. That weekend, it spread across the state. The headline, "Founder goes undercover to expose corruption in restaurant chain. Brave server helps uncover the whole truth." Emails began pouring in. Some apologized. Some thanked. Others shared similar stories from other branches, the same patterns, the same names. Marcus read each line not out of duty, but because he knew. Silence was where it all began. And now, the truth needed to be heard loudly, publicly, without denial. On Monday morning, Sadie entered the back office of the Fort Brenton restaurant as usual, but instead of a task list or shift notes from the manager, she found a neatly placed envelope with her name boldly printed in black ink. Her heart pounded as her fingers touched the thick paper. She opened it cautiously, as if afraid to break something sacred. Inside was a formal invitation to become the Fort Brenton branch manager, an official contract, a fixed salary, and full benefits and opportunities she had never dared to imagine. She blinked repeatedly, rereading it, fearing she was dreaming. When she looked up, Marcus was standing silently in the doorway, watching. "Are you serious?" she asked, voice trembling. Marcus nodded. "You deserve it." Sadie shook her head, still in disbelief. "I'm not sure I can." "You already have," Marcus interrupted gently but firmly. She clutched the letter like precious evidence. "No one has ever stood by me like this," she said. Marcus smiled softly. "You stood by yourself. I just made it real." That Friday, Sadie led her first meeting as manager. No speeches, no banners, just an honest conversation with all the staff about what was going well, what needed improvement, and how to move forward together. Marcus stood quietly at the back, listening. The atmosphere was no longer tense, but a true beginning. Eyes lifted, no longer fearful but expectant. Shoulders relaxed, voices no longer suppressed. And Marcus knew, this is how change starts, not by orders, but by trust. But as the restaurant slowly recovered, with Sadie managing fairly and empathetically, Marcus faced a greater decision, not about a single restaurant, but the entire legacy he had built. An email arrived from the CEO's office, not a threat, no lawyer's letter, just a subject line. Request for a face-to-face meeting. Marcus agreed, but on his terms. No boardroom, no skyscraper, no ties. They met one Sunday afternoon in the very Fort Brenton restaurant where it all began. The doors were closed for cleaning, but Marcus made sure all staff were fully paid that day. He sat at table number 3, his old spot, no hat, no jacket, just himself. The CEO entered, tall, well-dressed, but hesitant, aware this place was no longer under his control. "Mr. Whitmore," he offered his hand. Marcus shook it briefly and firmly. "You had quite a week, huh?" "No, more like a decade. I'm just cleaning up the mess." The CEO nodded slowly. "We read the article, reviewed the documents. Glenn has been fired. Legal is reviewing vendor contracts. Internal policies will be rewritten." Marcus did not smile. "Good. We want to invite you back. Not full-time, but as an advisor. Whether you want it or not, you remain the face of this brand." Marcus leaned forward. "Then start by listening to the people you forgot." The CEO hesitated. Marcus continued calmly. "I want to restore hours cut from workers' pay. I want anonymous hotlines at every branch. I want expanded health care for hourly staff starting here. And I want the new policies posted in every kitchen within 30 days. The CEO swallowed hard. "That's no small request." Marcus didn't blink. "My whole life, people told me I dreamed too big. Now, I don't want to dream small anymore." Silence fell. Then the CEO nodded. "You'll have it all." They shook hands again, this time sincerely. When Marcus returned to the kitchen where Sadie was wiping down the counter, he handed her a small envelope. Inside was $2,000 and a note with just 5 words, "For the day you spoke." Sadie said nothing, but she didn't need to. She had said the most important thing on the day everyone else remained silent. In the weeks that followed, the Fort Brenton restaurant changed not only in appearance but transformed completely in spirit. The old walls were repainted, the lighting softened, but the deepest change was in the rhythm of operations. No more shouting, no more wary glances between staff and management. Instead, there were quiet laughs during breaks, nods of agreement when sharing shifts, and a sense of trust even among new hires. Veteran employees were invited to train newcomers not to control, but to share experience. Sadie didn't give orders, she asked for opinions, listened, and made decisions together with the team. Meetings were no longer places for scripted announcements, but forums to find real solutions. And the food genuinely improved because no one had to cook under the pressure of fear. News spread quickly. From loyal customers to those who once avoided Fort Brenton, people returned because they felt the change. Nothing attracts diners more than a restaurant whose spirit lives in every dish. Fort Brenton, the branch once considered at risk of closure, became a model for the entire system. One late afternoon, Marcus sat in a small office, piles of paperwork spread before him when a gentle knock came at the door. It was Theo, a quiet dishwasher who often stayed late to finish work without being asked. "Mr. Marcus," he said softly, "my mom used to work for you at the Tulsa branch. When my brother got sick, you gave her paid leave. She always said you were different." Marcus looked up. "What's your last name?" "Ramsey," Theo replied, shy but proud. Marcus nodded slowly. "Tell your mom I remember, and that her son is doing very well." That night, after everyone had left, Marcus lingered. The restaurant was silent, save for the hum of the air conditioner and the faint glow from the sign outside. He sat alone at a table near the kitchen. Before him was a bowl of corn porridge Sadie had made just for him, simple, steaming hot, with 2 slices of toasted bread and melting butter in between. He ate slowly, savoring not from hunger but because each spoonful carried memories of early days building this dream, of those who believed, of the silent staff who carried the whole restaurant without recognition. Marcus looked around the space and took a deep breath. This was never just about a steak. It was about people, those forgotten, pushed aside, yet persistently showing up day after day. Like Sadie, who dared to ask questions when everyone else bowed their heads. Like Theo, who inherited his mother's kindness. Like the single mother who worked double shifts and remained nameless. Like the head chef who worked with a cast on his wrist because he couldn't afford sick leave. Marcus didn't want to save the restaurant industry. He only wanted to preserve something old but fading honesty, and perhaps rebuild a place where people don't have to whisper to be heard. If you've ever worked under a tyrant or been silent out of fear, this story is a reminder. Change doesn't start with a title. It starts with courage. The courage to speak up, to show up, and to support those who dare to sacrifice everything just to do what's right. Marcus's story reminds us that leadership isn't about titles, but about the courage to listen, to admit mistakes, and to stand for the truth. If you believe ethics still have a place in business, please like this video and subscribe to the channel to follow more real and inspiring stories like this. Comment the phrase, "Dare to stand," if you also believe in the power of courage.